Okay, so it's that time of the month again when we get together for a new episode of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. And today we are going to address a question that I've been hearing a lot from you lately, and that is how to work with a book publicist. And of course, when is the right time to hire a book publicist, and so many other questions related to this topic, but also to book marketing, especially in these times that keep our bringing in more and more surprises every day. But the good thing is that the book sales are on the rise, at least when it comes to ebooks. There is a lot to talk about today. There is a lot of good news. And I think the best news for you today is that we have here with us a veteran in the publishing industry, because he's been in this industry for over 17 years. So hello, Mike Onorato, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you and to talk about this wacky world of book promotion.
Yeah, it is indeed. And I know book marketing and book promotion is challenging for many authors. That's why many of them, they are considering hiring a book publicist. So for those who don't know you, I need to say that you are the Vice President of Publicity at Smith Publicity. You've been working with best-selling authors, and I saw there Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas, the late Kirk Douglas. Yeah, way back. On a book of his back in 2004, 5, 6, somewhere around there. What a remarkable man. I got to meet his wife. It was an amazing experience, an amazing story. And I would also argue, those days were the glory days of publishing, right? I mean, we had Barnes & Noble, we had Borders, we had Amazon, we had so many venues for authors, and so many ways to promote and sell a book. When I look back on those days, I look back at them with fondness because of how many things have changed 15 years or so later. What
enticed you into this industry and into helping authors marketing their books in the first place?
I began my career in public relations. I began working on, accounts for various clients, and it was interesting. I enjoyed working with the media. I enjoyed the writing aspect of it. Back in those days, we would pitch by phone or fax, to date myself. And so when I saw an opportunity with Wiley, which is where I spent 12 years of my career, everything to me sounded interesting. I wanted to work with authors. I wanted to work with media to help sell and promote a book. It just to me seemed like a wonderful opportunity. And so I was there for a long time. And it was amazing because I got to see really the entire range of when a project came in from the proposal stage till the marketing team got it to shape it. And then to eventually us in the publicity world got to tell the world about it. And so it was a variety of categories and a variety of authors, big and small. And it's just, for me, it's been an amazing adventure. I've been at Smith it'll be 4 years in October. A lot of the same discussions, a lot of the same meetings I had in-house, only I'm on the different side of the table now. Still working with authors, still working with some publishers to help either promote a list or to promote an individual book or author. So it's just what I enjoy doing. There is always something going on that keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, that's true. And, listening to you, I was just thinking about my career, and I kind of, our paths are similar because I started in PR and I was doing PR for luxury brands, fashion brands, for mass consumer goods. And then in 2015 at the London Book Fair, I realized this whole self-publishing industry is growing. And I said, why can't I use my expertise to help authors?
No question. And, and I think there's always going to be, God willing, there's always going to be a need for a story. There's always going to be a need for a good book and for conversation. As long as that's the case, there's going to be a home for us publicists and for authors. The world is a better place when we have authors telling a variety of stories from a variety of perspectives. At Wiley, it was all nonfiction, right? So I worked on a lot of business and self-help and sports and current events. And since in my time at Smith, I've gotten to really work with a lot of fiction authors as well. And it's just a remarkable world. Authors are a rare breed. We need more of them. We need as many as we can get. And so hopefully there's always going to be, a place and a home for those voices, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that this won't go away soon, as numbers just show that people are, instead of spending hours in front of their TV sets, they are reading more. So that's great. What authors don't really realize is that actually book publicists, they do tell a story. And you as an author, you need to tell a story beyond the story in the book. You need to know how to tell your story. You need to know how to tell the story of your book, and not only to the media, but also to your audience. Let's explain to authors what exactly is that a book publicist can do for them. How do you help them?
Traditionally, we help them through media outreach. So that would be podcast interviews, writing content for blogs or for websites, pushing for reviews, pushing for broadcast interview opportunities. So it really does run the gamut of traditional earned media coverage, different than marketing, right? Where there's a cost associated with that. We'll work with an author to really, again, pick out those creative hooks and angles that will get a reporter's attention. Mm-hmm. So there could be newsworthy things that are happening obviously right now. Seasonal tie-ins are really big, or just a contrarian point of view that frankly needs to be told, needs to be heard. So we work with them on explaining all of that. Obviously, we use things like press materials. Media still wants to see, a short press release on a book. We work with them on, those creative angles that maybe it's a different approach. Maybe it's working with a business author to help create a webinar nowadays while we're all sort of in this place that we're in. Lately it's been a lot of helping authors with original content. So short articles, 500 to 1,000 or a little over words, as exclusives, or even just, offering up that content. It's a great way for authors to get out there. I always say to them, we don't want you to spend all this time writing a book and now spend more time writing articles. But it is a vehicle that authors need to be ready to do. And we'll work with them on that and identifying, what is our target audience and, those target media outlets that are associated with that. So it really is anything to do with media relations. There is still a home for authors on broadcast, obviously on national and regional television and on some radio, believe it or not. Obviously podcasts are huge for us because they're so impactful. Mm-hmm. It's as we always used to say back in the day, it's a long form interview, right? So it could be a half hour or 45 minutes or more, where an author can really get into the themes of the book. It's not a quick 3 to 5 minute interview where you're just trying to get as much out as you can. Those long form interviews are crucial because they can, obviously help explain the book and the messaging, but also give the author a chance to shine, and give them a chance to tell their story. And I think that's the most important part of what we do. So we consider ourselves storytellers, and we try and think like the media. So we try and come to the table with those discussions and that in our mind, because we know what our media wants to see. So we need to draw that out of the author to show it.
Yeah. And I just want to say quickly regarding podcasts that arts and culture is one of the topics that at least the Americans are most interested in. So people do listen to podcasts that talk about books or interview authors. So that's a good place to go. I think one other thing that a book publicist has and an author doesn't have in the beginning, even if they can nail down the story, is this connection and this long-term build relationship with the journalists.
In our business, relationships are currency. They are absolutely currency. And, it's a little different than it used to be maybe 15, 20 years ago, where you could pick up, you could pull favors and get somebody on. Now it's almost as important because now we can at least get the feedback, right? Mm-hmm. So I may not get the actual booking, but I'll know why. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important too, because it may not be the book or the audience or the message. It just might be, hey, we had a similar guest on a similar topic last week. It could be as simple as that. So I think the relationships are really crucial. It's knowing how to manage those, knowing what they're looking for. So oftentimes we'll get an author who will say, I really think I have a great message for, Good Morning America. Mm-hmm. Because we know the producers there, we'll look through and say, okay, typically they look for A, B, C, and D, and kind of list through that. We find that if we're that transparent and honest, first of all, it's going to make for a stronger campaign. And second of all, the authors know where we're going. They we can speak from experience because we've been in those trenches, right? We've been fighting those battles. So it is important to have a good relationship. I mean, you need to, because you want them not only for this pitch that I'm sending you, but for the next 2 and 3 and 4 down the road. And burning a bridge can really just do some long-term damage.
You mentioned Good Morning America, and of course we are all familiar with Ellen DeGeneres show and big TV shows like that. And every author, even the aspiring one or the first-time author, dreams to be on those shows, but I guess that's really, really rare to get there from your first book, unless you're Kirk Douglas, probably.
It is rare, obviously. I mean, let's be honest. Every single author has that same dream, right? So it's challenging, not impossible. But what I always say to authors is watch the show for a week. Get a sense of it. Get a sense of the direction of it, the way they're going. Obviously, I wouldn't give that advice now because a lot of shows are truncated because of COVID-19 or the hosts are either work from home or there's a skeletal crew right at the studio. So kind of hard to make those comparisons now. But in a perfect world, watch the show for a week. Get a sense of the rhythm, the cadence, the messaging, the guests, and come up with your work with your publicist to come up with 3 to 5 bullet points that we could offer and pitch. We have to have tape. The producers need to see you on broadcast previously. They have to see how good you are, how strong you are. They want to get, the first question I get is, do you have tape? Now, to date myself, that was back in the day with tape. Now it's links, right? So they can they can do that, but they need to see those. We also like to present the entire package. So if it's a self-help book and the author is talking about how animals can help people, for example, recovering from trauma or how to get through a difficult time, and they use their dogs, their cats, their other pets. We need to be able to sort of show them that in action. So bringing examples of people who have done that, maybe a vet or 2, right? So sort of giving the complete package to the producer so they can get a flavor of the entire segment. And if we just, it's very rare that you just, are calling up and pitching out somebody who is so big that the name is immediately recognized. Usually there's a little education. This person is this. Here's a link to their site. Here is some previous opportunities that they've been on, and kind of building that case. But it does help to watch the show and know that it's a long shot. Of course it is, but we'll make the case for you if we feel it's a strong enough one to make.
And so then you need to have your author website in place and at least on social media channels. So all these little things that they may seem not so important, they actually are. So you need to do all that. If
an author is looking they finish the book and it's blood, sweat, and tears, it's been their life, they're done, and they expect that their work is finished, that's where it can be problematic because no one knows the book as well as they do. They need to work with us on those angles. And I always say to authors too, keep a notepad or keep your phone nearby. And when you see a news angle that even can tangentially relate to your book, jot it down, shoot us a quick email and say, hey, I saw this, I here's a link. I saw this coverage, in chapter 5, I was going to write about that, but I didn't. It might make an interesting hook. And that's an opportunity again to really, find those angles on those hooks. But we do rely on the authors to be those really strong partners with us.
I like this idea of a partnership between the author and the book publicist. I think that's the way to go. Otherwise, it just won't work. What should the author do within this partnership with a book publicist like you? But I guess this can apply to book publicists in general to make this partnership really work.
It's a great question. So one of the first steps that we do when a client or an author has signed on is we give them a pretty extensive author questionnaire. And yes, it's lengthy, but there's some really good information in there. And it's really it's the download. It's the way for an author to really talk about their goals, some interested media that they think might want to go after it, previous books, you name it, it's all captured there. One of the first things I do when I look at these author questionnaires is I go to the section where it says, it kind of asks about media that you think would be interested in the book or in your story. So you can imagine the first 3 are New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington. But, we look there to see, because oftentimes what will happen is an author they'll say things like, I'd love to get in the New York Times, and that would be wonderful. But for me, it's more important that I'm featured in Business Insider, or it's more important that I'm on this podcast. And so we'll look at those things. Be upfront, right? So if you've had an experience with a publicist prior and it either didn't work or there were some issues, talk to us about that. We're going to read the book as the campaign progresses, but on the second day of it, we're not going to have the book completely read. So talk about the bigger picture themes. Talk about why your book is unique. And we're going to do our research, and we're going to spend a lot of time on your socials and on your website and through your questionnaire and through the book. But if there's something that you think makes your book different than 3 or 4 other comp titles, call that out so we have that. I think it's the end of the day is, again, you as an author know the book the best. Help us get there. Yes, we'll do all of that work behind the scenes, but talk to us about, boy, I really would want to get on this podcast because XYZ, right? And that's what I mean about partnership. We're going to come to you with deadlines. Say, I need this piece written by this date, or I need you to do this by that date. We're going to present everything we hear. It is up to us as a team and you ultimately as the author to decide, hey, probably not a good fit for me. Fine. But, let us know right away so that we can either suggest somebody else or not leave the producer hanging. And then we burn a relationship, and then that's where it just sort of goes sideways. Provide us with ancillaries. So if it's a self-published author, provide us with cover image, high res. A couple of author headshots can be casual. They can be, formal and staged. Send over any other, if there's a lot of artwork in the book and there's, pick 3 or 4, send those to us via Dropbox or something. So we have those as sort of weapons to use, all those kinds of things are important. If you have links to previous interviews, previous coverage, please share that as well, because that'll be helpful for us to have as we go down that road.
When is a good time for an author to approach a book publicist?
It's a good question. It's one that we get often. And I would say it depends on your goal. So if your goals are for pre-publication reviews, if it's self-published in some of the trade press that accepts self-published books, then obviously months prior, if you have an arc. If you don't have an arc, fine. We can actually work with an author, a month before the book comes out. I would probably say right now, out of our current list of authors, probably 75% came to us when their book was already published. And that's okay, though.
It happens a lot, yeah.
It does, and that's all right, because we have a lot to work with. Typically, the book is more than a year old. We'll sort of give pause. But we have a lot of authors that come to us and say, look, reviews are great. What it's really important to me is becoming part of the conversation. And so I want to be included in expert commentary, and I want to be included in this and that. So I want you to work with me right before the book comes out, or, the book comes out next week and we start at that moment. For a book that has a news breaking component to it, meaning it's either there's news in the book that's breaking, or it can be part of a conversation, the sooner the better. The sooner could be 3 to 6 months, but it doesn't need to necessarily be that. So it really does depend. If you're an author that's planning a series, maybe you have, 1 book done now and you're working on book 2 and you envision 3 and 4, it makes sense to engage a publicist early so that we can start to get those reviews for book 1 and then eventually book 2 and 3, build up your cred as an author and sort of show that. But also depends on, on things like budgeting and all that sort of thing that comes into play.
What should an author expect when they hire a book publicist? What are the results they should see and they should be looking after?
That is a great question. If I'm with you for 3 months, what amount of sales can I expect? Look, we're in a sales-driven organization. We all know that, or a sales-driven environment in publishing. But it is about exposure. It is about building a brand. An author is a brand. That brand may change for each book, right? But they are a brand for that moment. You can expect us to work towards your goal. Your goal may not be Ellen, right? And maybe just to become a regular contributor at Inc. or Forbes, or to become somebody that is sought after in this particular industry or genre. And that's what we want to work towards. They can expect transparency. They can expect honesty. They can expect communication. They can expect strategy. They can expect creativity in terms of not only just press materials and angles, but in the way we're going to help tell the story. They can expect a partnership, right? So if we think hey, this book is a little too long. We should really work on cutting it down. That's based on our experience, having been in this for a long time.
So what would be the minimum ideal amount of time an author should work with a book publicist? I'm talking minimum.
Obviously, 6 weeks would be great. 6 months would be ideal.
Yeah.
Because in 6 months, we're really going to get a sense of what the initial reaction was from the media, how we pivot. We may have all started out in one place and all of a sudden we realized that's the way this is being perceived. We really should go in a different direction, and kind of go this way. The author's goals may have changed in that amount of time as well. So, that would be ideal. But, some of our campaigns are, again, 6 weeks, could be 3 months, whatever it is that, to really make sure that we can kind of, as I always say, plant our flag, right? And really do some work there. Because the quick hit campaigns, there's not enough time to write and strategize and pitch and follow, by the time you've done all that, the train has left the station, right? So you need to go back to that.
Yeah, and let's not forget that people's attention span is lower and lower. So your goal is to drive, especially on Amazon, you need to drive those daily steady sales.
Right.
So I think you need to be, of course, not overdoing it, but I think you, as an author, you need to be constantly in the spotlight. Don't let people forget that you exist, and drive people to your Amazon page or whatever your sales channel is every day, and get some sales every day. And that's where you need media exposure on a monthly basis, I think.
You do. And you need social media help, and you need all those types of things, all that feeds into it. I think you made a great point about every day, some activity you do should be driving sales in some way. And I think a lot of authors sometimes lose sight of that. And it's an important thing, just as we do. Every day we're trying to make sure that we're getting in front of somebody to influence them to either purchase your book, write about you, or help in some other way spread the word. And that's exactly how we look at it.
How did this work from home, lockdown thing change your relationship with, or impacted your relationship with the media?
It hasn't really. The only way it's impacted working with media is we used to send books to, their offices, and now we've had to do a lot more pre-pitching to get interest and say, oh yes, I'd love a copy. Please send it here. Please send it there. That's the big change we've noticed. I don't think the media's dropped off. They still see content. I'm noticing, for example, there are some things like a lot more requirements for writing articles because media spread thin themselves. And so they're saying, this is great. I'd love to do an interview. I can't, but can she turn around a 500, 700 word article by, 2 weeks from now? Yes, of course, So we've seen that. We've seen, and obviously an uptick in Skype or Zoom interviews. We've had a great success with Skype interviews from all sorts of things. I think what's interesting there is originally, you had to sort of have an author be in market. They're going to be in Chicago. They're going to be here or there. Now we're seeing that if they're strong enough and if the story is good enough, somebody will say, well, it doesn't matter where they are. I can have them on via Skype. Which is great. Even FaceTime, believe it or not. We've seen authors do FaceTime interviews, which is just mind-boggling on pretty big networks. And so I think that's pretty much the thing we're seeing. I have not seen a real impact, frankly, in the work with media, even at first, even in, early to mid-March when everything was really starting to shut down. We didn't necessarily see a huge, sort of slamming of the door. There was a lot of uncertainty. So we noticed a lot of things that were booked were getting postponed or rescheduled, obviously. But now it's pretty much business as usual. I think people are in a groove. They know how to do this. For me personally, I've just relied more on Zoom meetings. I've relied more on, quick connections with media, whether it be by email or by text, which is, always a slippery slope. You open that door, but you can't close it again. But they've been super responsive that way. We also recognize that in many parts of this country, and even in the world, but in the U.S. especially, media is in the same boat. They're not in their offices. They're working from home. They have kids running around. They have a spouse, slamming doors while they're on a podcast. And so which happened here. So they're more amenable, flexible, whatever word you want to use to that, because they're also, in that situation. When I was just in PR, just working in this industry on 9/11 or after 9/11, it was very different because obviously New York and Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania, those are the areas that were affected. But when you were pitching media in Chicago or Seattle or Houston, they weren't. So it was a little different. It was still, you could still do those things. This is obviously a global situation, so we're all impacted, in this country especially. So I think that's the one real difference this time, as opposed to the other real sort of, watershed moment in the publishing or publicity field, and that was 9/11.
Yeah. This is this is new to all of us. So we are all adapting and finding ways to continue our journey in serving other people, because I think authors with their books, they do serve people, whether they inspire them, they motivate them, they entertain them. Those books can change, can save lives. So those books are really needed in those times. And again, I think those numbers, they speak for themselves. How did you tweak your overall strategy? What would be your advice for an author who wants to market and promote their book right now?
I think is stick to your guns. You don't necessarily need to change your plans. It's, is an opportunity for, for your story, for your voice. And I think it's fine to, to promote your book as long as you're being respectful of what's going on in many parts of this world. In the U.S., we're sort of dealing with the triple-headed monster in terms of news coverage between, what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the pandemic, and obviously just major news breaking constantly. So, it's if you're going to promote your ebook first, that's fine, and you can even save your paperback or your hardback for down the road. But as long as you have it prepared, you can get it up on NetGalley, for example, or we can get it up on NetGalley for you. There is still a need for books. I would just caution you that you just want to make sure that the message that you're trying to tell at that moment is needed and it's not tone deaf, right? So it sort of can kind of read the room, as they say, right, and fit in that way.
What would be your top 3 book publicity tips for the authors?
Oh, I like that question. I mentioned before about the car metaphor. I do love that metaphor. It's tired and old, but I'll say it again: is be a partner. Be a partner and work with us on strategy. Number 2, I would say, is be active. So whether you're active on social, whether you're active on your own blog, whether you're active in video webinars, whatever it might be active. It's not the time to retreat. It's the time to, to really ramp that up. And I would say, thirdly, be unique. So if you're going after a podcast or going after a website, you want to not just be another book about blank. You want to be different. You want to be unique and call that out. So that's really, I think, the most important out of all those 3 is to really show why your particular book, your message, your story is unique.
Fiction authors, they tend to say, oh yeah, that's easy for a nonfiction author. They can find things to talk about because, right, they are coaches or professionals and experts. But what can I talk about on a radio show when it comes to my book?
So maybe it's your character. Maybe it's the way you develop this character. Maybe it's the story arc that has changed. One of the things that we were talking about recently is how many books in 6 to 8 to 9 months to a year are going to have the thread of COVID-19, right? And whether it impacted a character's life, it impacted their message. So talk about all of that. That's extremely relevant. If the author themselves has a really unique background. They worked for the Center for Diseases Control back in 1985 or something, and it's a fiction book about whatever it might be. Play up your background and experience too. Don't be afraid to talk about the person behind the book, as we always say. No one wants to interview a book; they want to interview a person. Fiction as well. So don't be afraid to call out some of that into it. I always say to authors, one of the interesting things you can talk about on any interview is your writing process. Everybody's is unique. So what journey did you take to get to this book? You started it 10 years ago, and then you sort of put it aside and picked up again recently because you've been home and you've had the time. Talk about all that. everybody, as I mentioned, everybody is unique and everybody's story is unique. So don't be afraid to also fall back on your experience and your process as an author.
You've been in this industry for so long, Mike. What do you think it will happen in the next 6 months in the industry? Do you see any shift in the readers' needs or preferences?
I think this experience has shown us that authors can connect to their audience and to their readers in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that they had to go to Books and Books, or they had to go to Diesel. They don't need to anymore. They can do this, virtually. But I think is great because then you're exposing the book and the author and the message to a much wider audience than is only able to physically attend. That's been a good thing. I think we're also going to see, sort of an uptick in the amount of voices, the different voices that we have not been seeing in our industry for a long time. I think there's going to be a thirst for content. I think the way in which you get it might be different. I've been to, this year would have been my 17th book expo. And I'm not going to lament, not going to the Javits Center. It's fine. But, we talk about that's one thing that may not come back. There may not be a need to put 1,500 people in a room or whatever, 5,000 people in a room together anymore.
Yeah.
But there doesn't mean that we don't want to tell the stories. That doesn't mean that we're not going to do that. So I think that's one of the big changes. I think a lot of authors are going to realize and learn other ways they can interact with their audience. Maybe it's a Twitter takeover. Maybe it's an AMA ask me anything on Reddit. It could be anything. I think those, an Instagram Live, a Facebook Live, a lot of those things are going to be available to them. We will see more acceptance of that, which is great. It helps us overall when we see those kinds of things happen more.
Overall, I think, more opportunities for authors, more challenges, because I think more and more people, they are thinking and actually getting to writing a book. So the market will continue to grow and be crowded with books. But I think with talent and determination and with help from people like Mike and his company, then I think you have a chance to stand out and find your audience.
I hope so. I think authors keep writing. Don't stop. This may be a unique environment, but we've been through unique environments before. Your voice and your perspective is so needed. And I like to think that ours is too. And we'll be here for you. And when you're ready to talk about promoting your book, I hope you'll call me.
That's a great message to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Mike Onorato. And thank you for tuning in again and watching this episode of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. Don't forget to visit Self-Publishing Mastery for more articles, interviews, and you will find this interview there as well. And as Mike said, keep on writing.